This is AI Inside, episode 53, recorded Wednesday, January 29th, 2025. Artificial Aesthetics with Lev Manovich. This episode of AI Inside is made possible by our wonderful patrons at patreon.com/AI Inside Show. If you like what you hear, head on over and support us directly, and thank you for making independent podcasting possible. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of AI Inside. This is the podcast where we take a look at the AI that is layered inside of so many things in the world of technology, from creativity to productivity to everything in between. We've got a really great show coming up for you today with a wonderful guest. Before we get there, got to bring in my co-host. I'm, of course, Jason Howell, always joined by Jeff Jarvis. How you doing?
Of course
Jeff?
you are.
It's good to see you, Jeff.
Good to see you, Jason.
Good to have you back. Good to have the support of all of our patrons. Thank you so much for driving much of what we do. Patreon.com/AI Inside Show. Gina Jordan is one of our amazing patrons. So Gina, thank you.
Thank you
for contributing and contributing to the health of this show on a weekly and monthly basis. We literally could not do it without you. And then also just a quick reminder before we get started that AIinside.show is our website. If you go there, you can subscribe to the podcast. You can also find links to our new YouTube channel, which is at AI Inside Show on YouTube. So pretty much AI Inside Show is kind of the thing to remember, and you can find us in all ways, shapes, and forms when you remember that. But let's get right in, because yet another week where we have an awesome guest joining us, and this has been a little while in the works because we talk so often, Jeff and I talk on this show about the intersection of creativity and artificial intelligence. I've got a very creative mind. I'm a musician. I'm always looking for ways in which creativity is being impacted and influenced by new technology. And you can't get much more down that road than we are right now with how artificial intelligence is influencing the development of creativity and what it means to be an artist or what it means to be a musician in a day and age when we can use words to create things, as opposed to, having to teach ourselves these skills over decades to become an expert. The landscape is changing a lot. And so today's guest can really talk to kind of how society in this creative era that we're living in is really impacted by the power and influence of artificial intelligence. Lev Manovich is a professor of computer science at the City University of New York, also author of many books on digital culture, new media, and the theory around it. In fact, Lev, you co-authored along with Emanuele Ariely, hope I pronounced Emanuele's name right, Artificial Aesthetics, Generative AI, Art, and Visual Media, and you released it online at manovich.net. Lev, it is a pleasure to bring you on AI Inside. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And this has been a long time coming. Like I said, Jeff, you've had the word in my ear for a while. We've got to get Lev. We've got to get Lev at some point because he would be perfect to talk about this stuff.
So Lev and I are actually officially former colleagues at CUNY, though different parts of the empire there. And I had the privilege of reading Lev's new book, Artificial Aesthetics, as it was in process, because he was writing it publicly online. And it's a really compelling provocative work about AI and aesthetics. And so, Lev, I'm not going to try to summarize it, but we'll ask you to your view on whether AI has an aesthetic.
Thank you guys for having me. So I'm not sure I can summarize the book either, because half of the chapters were written by my co-author, half of the chapters were written by me. Another thing which I think is interesting about this book, so we met and we started talking, and my co-author, he is a professor of aesthetics at the Architecture and Design School in Venice, and he lives in Berlin. And we met in 2019 and started talking, realized that we have so many points in common. And then we decided to do this book, and I convinced him to release the chapters online so we can participate in this cultural moment. But I think what's interesting is we released the first chapter at the end of 2021. Even the second and third chapter were 2022, and then this explosion happened, right? So as we know, ChatGPT was released in the fall of 2022, but a bit earlier in the summer of 2022, Midjourney released become groundbreaking tool for image making. So half of a book was kind of written almost in anticipation of what's going to come, and this explosion, this moment which really changes everything about, I think, who we are as humans, about what does it mean to produce knowledge, what does it mean to have skills, what does it mean to be creative. Even half of a book, was produced after kind of trying to describe this new medium as it comes in. So to answer your question more directly, there are a few pages in the book, right, about AI aesthetics. Because I think when people see the title, they think of aesthetics as maybe like what makes things beautiful, like the traditional idea, or maybe we think of aesthetics in a more contemporary sense, because a few years ago, people started to use the word aesthetics as synonym for style, right? So this aesthetics. So people assume that the book is mostly about, how the images or videos you make with AI tools look, and I talk about it, but it's much, much larger than that, right? So half of the book, half of my chapters deal with kind of history of our concepts about art, creativity, etc. Like, for example, how do we define a masterpiece? Where does the concept of creativity comes in? Like I explained that it's a kind of a modern idea of art as this person who creates things, original things, doesn't follow the rest of society. It's a very modern idea. It's only maybe about 200 years old. And for most of human history, art was about skills, right? In ancient Greece or in Middle Ages, there was no concept of art or creativity in contemporary sense. I mean, artist was a craftsman, right, who had a particular skills, and Plato didn't really respect artists. So partly the purpose of the book is to educate people who are interested about AI, who want to learn about AI aesthetics and art, to come expand and to question our common ideas about art and aesthetics. And then another part of the book is to try to conceptualize creative AI within the history of digital media. Like for example, I make the argument that we can think of creative AI not necessarily as only something which is part of history of AI, which begins in the 50s, right? And this idea that we're going to simulate human intellectual capacities, etc., and now we're able to simulate, let's say, human aesthetic or art-making capacities, but to say actually it's a new media which can be thought of as simply a new stage in the development of digital media. So things like computer graphics, which begin in the 80s, and then the web, and interactive media, which begins in the 90s. And when you think about it, right, this generative AI is only possible after 30 years of the web, right? So the humanity spent 30 years creating digital content, images, videos, comic books, texts, podcasts, and also museums and libraries and archives, digitizing our cultural heritage, and all the stuff ended up online. Right? And when we can feed it to the computer can extract patterns, and it can learn to generate new cultural objects, new cultural artifacts with same characteristics. Right? So it's a very particular kind of development. And then the last thing I would mention, in the history of AI, right, people talk about this thing which we call AI effect. So whenever the computer scientists and engineers are able to solve some problem, like automatic translation, or let's say you're typing on your phone and your phone kind of understands that if you hit the key B, actually you wanted to hit the key P, right? There's always kind of smart things which our devices do. And as soon as some kind of problem like that is solved, it's no longer thought of as a part of AI. So historically, AI is always something which is on the frontier. AI is always something which is not working yet. And I think the same thing will apply to this moment. So in a few years, we're not going to be thinking about ChatGPT and Claude AI and Midjourney, Stable Diffusion as AI tools. We will simply become ubiquitous. We will simply become sort of invisible. And whatever is the new challenge which haven't solved yet will become AI. So I hope I'm not frustrating you too much with my answer, but in a way, like ironically, I can say that actually the book is maybe about everything else and not the AI aesthetics. Or basically, it's about different perspectives to think about this moment, right? Okay, going back to ancient Greek and to Renaissance, and also looking at this moment in the context of, let's say, last 30 years of development of digital culture, and also thinking about what will happen next after this moment.
Yeah, and also what fascinates me in the book too is the relationship to the viewer, to the public, to the AI anticipating that and where that goes. And I agree with you. And I think that inevitably with technological tools and creativity, the tools start as technology and the technology fades into the background. And that's where we go. I'd love it if you'd talk for a minute about your work as an artist collaborating with AI. And how you work with it, what you think about it as a collaborator, and also what reaction you get from the art community to that.
Yeah. Thanks for asking this question. So my work as a kind of writer, a critic, and theorist is a bit different from, let's say, most of my colleagues, because I was originally trained as an artist. Since the age of 13, I was trained in visual arts. When I went to NYU Film School, I worked in the computer graphics, visual effects industry for 6 years. And when I was actually teaching digital art for 20 years, and when I kind of was hired, offered the job at the graduate center, and they said, well, we really want you, but we don't know where to put it, because we don't have any art at the graduate center, but we have to attach it to some program. I said, so what are my choices? And they actually said, well, we can put you into art history, or we can put you in computer science, because we think you kind of belong to both places. And I thought, okay, well, I'll choose computer science. But just remember that I only took one computer science class in my life, right? And now I'm teaching PhD students in computer science, and I do know more than them. So working on this book, right, and coming up with all these ideas kind of went hand in hand with almost daily using this AI image making tools. And so the book is also about these experiences, reflecting about them. And I will just say a couple of things. So on the one hand, for me as an artist, right, who used all kinds of media in his life, starting with pen and oil paints, and then computers in the 80s, this new development is absolutely amazing. It is as mind-boggling, it is as exciting, and I think it is as consequential, both for my own practice, but I think also for everybody else, at least as we developed the web in the 90s, and probably at least as big as the development of photography in the 19th century, printing press, etc. So it's huge. So what does it mean, right, to be creating with AI? Well, so one very practical result is that you can basically try and realize many more ideas, right, in the same amount of time. So it's like as though having thousands of very skilled assistants, right, and you can try this thing and that thing and that thing. So let's say if I make some realistic drawing with lots of detail, maybe it takes me 50 hours to make these drawings. Now I can make 5,000 of these drawings in a few minutes. So that's one side of it. But then there's another side. So let's say you have all these assistants, but they have their own mind, right? In a way, they're not like a traditional tools, where the tool just kind of follows your hand, right? Like you take a pencil, and as long as you have skills, the pencil is not going to interject its own ideas, right? Its own aesthetics. It kind of follows, your mind. But with AI assistants, and again, using one AI tool, it's like, because it can simulate different media and can simulate the styles of different artists, it's like having a studio of tens of thousands of people. We often, or most of the time, you don't quite know what we're going to do, right? And you don't quite know like how we're going to interpret your idea. So you type a prompt and you have this image in your mind, and sometimes you get something which is closer to what you imagine, and most of the time you get something completely else. When you look at what you get, you can say, oh, that's very interesting. So AI suggested something completely different than what I imagined. And most of the time, you say it's not interesting. And once in a while, you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then you kind of refine your prompt, you generate more images, in this particular part of a creative space. So in a way, I think of working, right, creatively with AI, sometimes AI works as your collaborator, and other times it's like a war, right? Because it's injecting its own ideas, it's misinterpreting you, and actually these are the moments as an artist I find most interesting, right? So I've done lots of different image series, and we have lots of ideas, and for whatever reason, maybe I'm just like too stubborn as a person. When AI simply executes kind of almost mechanically what I want, to me this is boring. So my favorite results happen when, let's say, maybe I mistype a prompt, or maybe I didn't explain something correctly, or simply the AI tool did something I could not imagine, and I kind of like these mistakes. I like this. Sort of randomness. And 20th century artists, lots of artists explored right randomness, random numbers in computer graphics. Like surrealists use different techniques, like exquisite corpse, etc. So AI introduces like a high level of randomness, right? A high levels of unpredictability. So basically it has this ability to really surprise you, and being stubborn. So I like, and I really enjoy this moment, right? Basically what I enjoy is like using these tools. It's sometimes enjoyable and sometimes it's very frustrating. And sometimes you simply feel that you're at war with some alien creative intelligence.
Yeah, and that's exciting in its own right, and interesting in its own right. I think what comes to mind for me from hearing you kind of talk about that, and then squaring that up with the title of the book, Artificial Aesthetics, is the fact that when we look at art generated by AI right now, like it has a certain quality to it. It has this like glassy, surrealistic quality that if you know what you're looking for, you can look at it and be like, okay, that was definitely not generated by a human, or if it was a human imitating AI art. Like it has that kind of AI gloss. And on one hand, like that's something that's interesting and appealing to me just from the sense that it has its own aesthetic, and I think that's kind of cool that there's these different types of art that elicit different types of approaches, and this is very much the approach of the AI generation of art aesthetic. But there are a lot of people that see that and immediately go, oh well, it's slop, it's trash. It's trash because it was created by AI, and any of the kind of unpredictability of the image is a tell that this is garbage and we shouldn't pay attention to this. Like, I guess at the root of this is this idea of like, what is true art versus not true art? And I think a lot of people look at AI generated art and don't see it as art. I do, but I think a lot of people don't. I'm curious to know what kind of where you land on that.
Yeah. So a couple of things. Yeah. So one thing is that you're right with lots of images we see online, which people label, or like maybe Facebook labels it as produced with AI, do have this recognizable kind of very glossy, kind of clean, somewhat generic, and sometimes like surreal quality. And I would say it's a reflection of partly the aesthetics and the taste of like millions of users who use these tools, who actually haven't went to art or design schools, and also it's a reflection of like what tools like Midjourney call their house style, right? So it's like the default. Think about like when you're using ChatGPT, right? You're typing a prompt, it's going to write something back. It also has this like default voice, which you may find enjoyable or not. But if you just spend like a tiny bit of effort, and if you add, let's say you can add image references to control more aesthetics of the results to a prompt, or you can add, say in the style of this artist, or add other specifications like line drawings, etc. It changes, right? So if you actually look at my images, each series has somewhat different style, and none of them has this generic style, right? But I think because let's say there is, according to the web statistics, there is 15 or 20 million of kind of users using these tools, and 99.90% of them are not professional designers, artists, architects. We just kind of go with house style, and you do get this AI aesthetics, which I think maybe people have a right to criticize because simply these users have not spent enough time. To me, AI aesthetics is actually about something else, right? What's kind of amazing about this development of generative AI is that you have a single tool which if you tell it to, can simulate to a certain extent the styles of tens of thousands of architects, designers, fashion people, street artists, etc. Maybe it can simulate like perfectly or not. That's a separate question. Turns out there are limits to it, but on the surface it can. And to me, this is very interesting, right? Because in the modern period, we think of an artist or as an author, right? We think of a creative person as having a particular voice, right? A particular ways of expression. Maybe it is like Jeff writing, his blog, like to me writing, or I don't know, Marcel Proust, etc. There's a particular recognizable voice, and we can cherish this voice, right? And let's say, even if I'm professional, well-trained artist, I can't, or a writer, it would be very difficult for me to start writing tomorrow in a different voice, just as it would be very difficult for me to start working with different work, or, only professional actors can imitate, right, with different face expressions, different voices. It takes big effort. So every human has a particular voice, particular way of talking, right, particular way of expressing, and some people will really cherish how they express themselves. So now we're in this amazing new situation where I can use this tool, which allows me to kind of separate my idea, my concept from the aesthetics, right, from the style of expression, because I can basically render, right, the same idea in thousands of different aesthetics. Right. So what does it mean for our concept of art? Right. What does it mean for our concept of artistic identity as art? Right. How do we think about artists? Where does it mean that all art becomes conceptual, and then this idea of voice is no longer important because voice is something, or your particular signature is something which is simulated by the machine? I don't think me or anybody else has the answer, but that's one of the very interesting questions. But in a way, AI aesthetics simply means that, AI can simulate all types of aesthetics. And then what does it do to your identity as an artist or a creator?
So, Lev, I'm now that I've left CUNY, I'm a visiting professor at Stony Brook University. And I have a course on the schedule in the fall on AI and creativity as an undergraduate level course. And I'm fascinated to go off what you were just talking about in terms of voice. I argued when ChatGPT came out early on that one of the options for it could have been could be to think that people could extend literacy. Those who were frightened of writing can now tell their stories. And then some of my students in the executive program I started said, "Whoa, there, you might lose the distinct voices of people to the homogenous voice of all that came before that trained AI from those who had the privilege to publish." And similarly with aesthetics and with design. And so I'm curious what lessons students should be getting about their own creativity and voice. And you're an artist, an established artist, and you're using this tool and you're getting into war with it, as you said, which I love, because you're stubborn and you have a vision of what you want to create, and maybe it collaborates, maybe it doesn't. But for a student who doesn't know their voice yet, or doesn't think they know their voice, or they're timid about it, how should AI be used as an educational tool with creativity to enhance their creativity and their voices, not to homogenize them?
Well, I think that's a question which millions of educators around the world, right, are struggling with. Like, for example, many of my colleagues say, we no longer can assign essays because the students can turn in these essays written by AI. In my case, I teach computer science students, so we don't write essays, we do other things. But let's say I started getting emails from colleagues, maybe somebody wants to interview me, or somebody wants to ask me a question, and I get these emails from these countries where you don't expect people to write in perfect English. And now suddenly I start getting these emails, these interviews,
Right,
which are written in perfect English, and then you wonder how to think about it, because that the person wrote this using AI, and hopefully when the person wrote it using AI, or maybe a person wrote it in her language and AI just translated this, hopefully the content of this email, the content of this interview questions is exactly what this person wanted to write, or maybe not, right? But ultimately, I think it's a good thing because it does allow more people to express themselves. I think that I believe that all technology, all digital media is particularly good for people maybe who haven't who don't have privilege of going to top schools, or people like in various developing countries, because it levels a little bit more playing field. So I do think with tools as having extremely positive effect. At the same time, right? I think the way everything in society, right? You often you can't just get something and only good effects, right? So many things come to us and with both positive and negative effects. So on the one hand, I see this incredibly democratizing effects of AI technology, but at the same time, right, there is a danger that you start speaking or expressing yourself, right, or making music or making videos like everybody else, but there is a kind of particular kind of loss of individuality, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like we enable you, but as a part of this enabling, maybe you can ask new questions. You can email to Jeff or Lev Manovich, but suddenly the questions you're asking are maybe less original than you would have asked before. And we have to decide, right, as society, as people, how do we deal with this kind of this tension, right, between these two different effects. But one more thing I want to say, it may change a few years from now, but I think my experience, right, I use AI to make images, I use AI to edit my books, et cetera, right? Basically, in lots of studies which have been published in top scientific journals over the last years, like Science and Nature, they would give some tasks to doctors, even compare doctors' performance, like making diagnoses to AI, or we compare AI performance to CEOs, or we would compare AI performance to like writers, and all the studies results are more or less similar. That we say the AI in this experiment, the AI is better than 95 to 97% of professionals. So this is with horrifying news, right? That the AI is probably better than your doctor.
Right.
So then the conclusion which people draw from this is a kind of optimistic. We say, okay, but the best humans, the best doctors, the best CEOs, the best artists are still better. Okay, but here's my experience. So let's say I'm editing my text, right? So I can ask AI, okay, here's a sentence. How do you improve a sentence? AI says, okay, here's 10 different ways to write the sentence, and here's the differences are. I never, ever in my whole life, and I published hundreds of articles, right, and lots of books like you, there's probably this amazing editor sitting somewhere, 100-year-old editor sitting somewhere in some publishing house or sitting in New York Times who is better than AI, but I've never met this person in my life. Right? So we horrifying conclusion is realize, yes, there is this 3 or 5% of human experts who are better, but the typical doctor, the typical editor, I'm not talking about, and also talking about the students, right? No student in my class, and no student last week I had a conversation with students at Harvard. They had nothing to ask me. We're just silent. We're just sitting there eating their pizza. Whereas the AI would basically generate a list of 10 questions. So we have to kind of accept this horrifying conclusion that we created technology which is better than most of us, and then, what does it do to our dignity, right? What does it do to our kind of sense of self-worth? But at the same time, what I want to say is at the moment, like AI, like you ask it something to do something, it's good, even bad. So what I realized, like if I ask AI to make some theories like me, and I look at the results, I have to know as much as Lev Manovich to evaluate the results, right? I have to have this 50 years of art experience to evaluate AI image output and to say good, bad. In other words, I still have to be the top expert or narrow expert in a particular field to evaluate AI outputs, right? Which means that the students still have to learn. In fact, they have to learn harder. And the best students, the best minds would use AI, I think, in a very adventurous way, advantageous way. And the rest of people would use it in a very complacent way. So in a way, like AI would kind of make the best people better, and the rest of people, it may make them like a bit even more lazy. But maybe in the future, people will invent like a new level of AI, where there's going to be another AI which will evaluate this AI and say, actually, this is good result or not. But for now, it makes sufficient number of mistakes, and these mistakes matter. So when we say AI is wonderful, I think we forget that, yes, but AI wrote this text for me, but I corrected the sentence, and if I didn't correct this one sentence, the result actually would be terrible. So in a way, education matters. And I think what we can also say, what people always say, the society is going to change, the technology is going to change, and the people have to learn how to learn. So like in a way, the more flexible you are, the wider your knowledge base, the more skills you have. As long as you will be able to evolve, right, in future, you'll do okay, right? If you just can learn one little thing and get stuck, then I think like AI will replace you.
Yeah, it seems like what I'm hearing you stress the importance of is the difference between people who use AI wholesale to do the thing. I'm just going to use this thing to create that thing, and yay, my work is done here. Isn't it great that you created it?
And I'm done. I'm done. Right. Exactly.
Versus the collaborative approach, which is, in my experience, been the real powerful kind of insight into how I use these tools, is when I stop looking at it as a replacement for my effort and start looking at it literally as like, even though it's a machine, a human-like machine sitting next to me that I can bounce ideas off of and get to places that I couldn't have gotten before, or it would have taken me a lot longer or a lot more effort to get there before. It kind of accelerates through that collaborative experience.
Or what you said, Lev, it's not just the collaboration. Well, I'm thinking about collaboration. What I love about what I take away from our conversation is it's more the confrontation. That's where, when it challenges you to be better, or it challenges you with something that it fights you on, that's where the interesting stuff is. Not that it helps you do what you already wanted to do, but gets you to do things you may not have known you wanted to do. Is that fair?
Absolutely. And maybe if we have like 30 more seconds, I would add one more thing.
Oh, yeah.
I think the big limitations of generative AI right now, like maybe it is making images, or videos, or music, or like editing, writing text, right? It basically learns patterns in the training data. In the training data, which is the web, right? It's not, there are certain things which are represented, right, more frequently, certain images, certain ideas, right, certain feelings, and there are other things which are more rare. Which means when we're using generative AI, it tends to give you answers, write text, make images, which often tend to be on the generic side, right? In other words, it is less likely, and also that's just how technology works, right? It basically tries to predict, what is probable, right? When you train with AI systems, you take a sentence, you mask part of a sentence, and then you train the machine to predict the rest of the sentence, so it will predict the most common sense sentence. So this battle, right, against the AI systems, which I'm describing, it's constantly looking at the output and saying, okay, this is good, but there is something generic. This is not my idea. This is not original enough, which is not specific enough, so I have to rewrite it. And I think it takes lots of education, lots of experience to be able to recognize that this is the generic result, this is stereotypical result, and this is the unique result.
Yeah,
and I don't think this problem will be solved tomorrow, because this is kind of fundamental to how statistics, data science, and AI works, which means that it's, in a way, it's a struggle against the common, the stereotypical, the banal, and it's it's an interesting struggle. And I think we have to somehow educate our students, right, to recognize this and to strive against simply replicating, simply kind of copying, the most common answer.
To care enough to have something they want to say. That we've helped. That's what education is, right? We help them bring out what they want to do and what they need to say.
But I think also encouraging them, which is, I think, a real challenge in our environment, right? Because some people say that the cultural developments of the last 10 years, right, created this atmosphere where maybe people are afraid to have real dialogue, people are afraid to have like real struggle of ideas because nobody wants to offend everybody. And that's wonderful. Our society has become very sensitive. But as a result, like, maybe people are afraid to express sometimes in public the ideas which are not popular. Well, this is actually a terrible thing, right? Because that's what AI, in a way, is designed to do, right? AI is designed in a way to express, to give you most common ideas. So we have to fight for independent thinking. We have to fight for diversity of ideas.
I had a conversation yesterday. I know I'm dragging you on a little longer than we planned, but this is fascinating. I had a conversation yesterday with a journalist in Denmark. And we were talking about how people, and they do this with search engines, people are franker with a search engine. They'll ask a question of a search engine they won't ask of a friend. right? They may end up in a dialogue with AI that they wouldn't end up in public. And so it's interesting too. And when I wrote the book, The Gutenberg Parenthesis, I was fascinated by the impact of silent reading. Silent reading led to things that you wouldn't do in public, like pornography.
Right.
Silent reading and silent writing. So I almost think...
You mean but information, because before like end of 18th century, people would like read loudly. What you're referring to, I think, right? In
Exactly.
Europe, end of 18th century, people started to read silently, which to us we take it for granted, but was actually a cultural revolution at the time.
Right, and it led to heresy, because you could have a forbidden thought that you could read or write, right?
Exactly.
So as you're talking, I almost envision a potential of private art with AI. That, as you just talked about the sensitivity to not say things in public because you can't. Well, you can enter into a dialogue with AI in text or in images or in sound that is private, which is fascinating. So sorry, I didn't. That was just a little
that's perfect. That's perfect. Yeah, yeah. I mean, and I think there's something encouraging here, because I'm fascinated by the generative AI ability to be like very encyclopedic. So when you ask it like a question about something, right? You say, okay, can you like, give me some options, some ideas? It will say, here's 10 ideas.
Yeah.
Here's 10 options, right? So in a way, like we humans, we get obsessed about particular idea, and we can go down this rabbit hole, and then the best of us develop this really original, visions, etc. But our ability, in a way, our lack of ability to be very like objective and to be very encyclopedic, it also what hinders us. So I think if we can somehow learn, right, to combine our obsession with with being like very deep and narrow, with AI, like Wikipedia, like encyclopedia ability to look at all the options, then in a way we can have a new kind of symbiosis, and I think a better humanity. So kind of using it like, right, not trying to kind of make AI exactly like us, not trying to replicate the negative parts of evolution, but using AI as a kind of as to supplement what we can't do as well, for example, in thinking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. So cool. Thank you so much, Lev.
Thank you so much, Lev.
Yeah, really appreciate you taking the time to join us to talk about this.
I realize we hardly talk about the aesthetics. We talk about everything else, but I think that's what in a way. I think it reflects, represents the book pretty well, right?
Yeah, it does. It does.
Indeed.
Yeah, about this moment, and how does AI changes also knowledge, thinking, creativity, education. So art is just maybe one place where we see these things more clearly, but it basically applies across the board.
And our relationship to art, yes.
Sure. And the fact that all new technologies require new skills, and we're kind of in the point right now of learning those new skills to work with it in the best possible way. And that's a pretty, I have an optimistic outlook on that. I think ultimately we're going to get to a good place, and it sounds like you do too. Lev Manovich, of course, is the professor of computer science at the City University of New York, co-author of Artificial Aesthetics, and just really appreciate your time, Lev. Thank you so much for hopping on with us today.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for having this wonderful podcast.
Oh,
thank you, sir.
Appreciate that. And we'll reach back out, have you back again sometime down the line. Thank you again, Lev.
Oh, voyage.
We'll talk to you soon. Yay, we made it happen.
Yes.
So happy. Love it. Good stuff. Anyone who's watching or listening to the podcast, if you have thoughts about what we talked about with Lev, contact at AIinside.show. There we go. I've got too many shows. Contact at AIinside.show. Let us know what you think, and we could read it in a future episode. We appreciate your feedback. Let's take a quick break, and then when we come back, I'll give you 3 guesses what we're going to talk about, because if you've been following AI news, you already know it's DeepSeek. That's coming up here in a second. All right, DeepSeek. You know what, Jeff? We talked about DeepSeek before it was really, really cool.
Yeah, we were cool. Benedict Evans, I give credit to Benedict Evans, who I quote often, who at the end of the year said, "Oh, DeepSeek snuck in with the big news of the year." And I thought, what the heck is DeepSeek? And then we looked it up and we played with it and talked about it. And so, yeah, we were way ahead. We should have we should have shorted Nvidia out of that.
Yeah, right. If we had only known, and if I've never had a good financial sense of anything along those lines, so that would never be the thing that comes top of mind for me. But boy, has DeepSeek shaken so much of the conversation around artificial intelligence, around these companies that for the last couple of years we've been watching invest massive amounts of capital into their models because that's how you do it, and and throw that in air quotes, and Nvidia creating these massively capable GPUs that are incredibly expensive and super powerful in order to drive all of this. And then a Chinese company called DeepSeek comes along and does it for a fraction of the cost in a short amount of time, and they're able to create a product that is really going toe to toe with all of those systems. And so, everything that I've read from people who have been analyzing this, they're just basically saying, whoa, the goalposts have changed. Things have shifted because of what DeepSeek has proven here. And just real quick before we get to the actual news, I think you'll appreciate this, Jeff. I had a DeepSeek dream a couple of nights ago. That's how...
You're doing too much of this, Jason.
Apparently I am, but in my dream... I was having a conversation with my wife, and I was like telling her about the fact that you and I were going to talk about DeepSeek on the podcast and kind of explaining it all to her. And in the dream, I sounded like I really knew what I was talking about. So...
So this news is fascinating because I'm not really sure why it hit the way it did in the last week. DeepSeek came out in late December. It's different in a couple of ways. We played with it on the show. It supposedly it has two things: a search and a rational sense, a thinking sense.
Right.
And if you ask it a question, it will supposedly show you its thoughts. Now, I don't know if we talked about this in the show. I don't know if that's real or if that's made up to make you think that it's thinking. But anyway, it's interesting. It's a bit different. But you're right, Jason. People are impressed. But what was clear is that they did it, and we talked about this in the show last week. They did it with fewer expensive chips because they can't get them in China because we're cutting them off. So, maybe
within their limitations, right? And so often, really great things come. The shifts in thinking come from working within limitations. And this is
iambic pentameter, mate, right? Haiku, right? The limitations create creativity from our last discussion too. Mm-hmm. And so obviously what happened was there was a moment where people woke up and said, oh crap, we're spending $500 billion on Stargate. We're buying Nvidia chips up the yin-yang. Nvidia's doomed suddenly, which was stupid. It wasn't doomed. Maybe the market's a bit smaller.
There was a huge sell-off of stock, 17%.
Went down 17%. And then the next day, I saw stories on this today in the Wall Street Journal. Retail investors, individuals, pumped it back up because they bought on the dip. That they said, this is ridiculous, 17% for something that was so rising so high. So it rose again. I think yesterday it was about 8.5%. Last I looked, it was down 4% from that line today. So it's going to be a roller coaster, as technology in a way should be. And there's discussion about whether DeepSeek cheated a little bit, whether it used OpenAI to train its thing. Right. Even so, it created an amazing model without... a data center the size of Manhattan, without a gazillion NVIDIA chips. This says something. The other thing about it, and I don't know if this is in the rundown or not, I forget, but the other thing I talk about in the show a lot, and I think this is a bit of a victory for open source too.
Oh yeah,
because
100%.
They used Meta's Llama. They built on something because it was open, and again, it's not fully open source; it's open, stipulated, Your Honor, open-ish. But I think that it's important for all of these reasons. Do we need to have this huge investment? Is it possible for other developers to do things at a smaller and doable scale? Is the expense thus a lot less? Is the environmental impact potentially less? Is the competition greater? That's what I think DeepSeek represents. Whether it itself is the future, whether it's anything, no, but it opens up this discussion, which I think is really healthy in this gestational industry that we cover.
Yeah, and especially at this moment, the next story that we were going to talk about has to do with, kind of the government. Actually, no, I'm realizing I took that out because I think we talked about it last week, or it happened before last week's show, but President Trump's rescinding the Biden era executive order around AI safety. And essentially right now is this moment where there is this massive groundswell of we've got to be first, we've got to be bigger, better in all ways, shape, and form when it comes to AI. And yet here we have kind of at this particular moment where that temperature is so high and so important, seemingly, you got this Chinese kind of upstart company that really seems to have come out of nowhere. It created a model or a series of models that go toe to toe with the ones here in the U.S. that have been created with billions upon billions of dollars and a whole lot of time, and all of this, as they like to say, their moat around their services, built an incredible moat to kind of prove that their value is so much better than anything else out there. And then yet here you have this example of, well, wait a minute, this kind of came from nowhere with incredible limitations, and it's got them scrambling. Some articles I've read, show that the war room in Meta, where they're like, how the heck did they do that, and how can we replicate it? And to a certain degree, seems like it might kind of change the roadmap or the blueprint for these companies as we, are only at the beginning of 2025 in a way that even they might not have predicted.
Yeah, I think you're really right. And also, I think at a time of economic and cultural isolationism, this punctures that wall. I saw a story today, and this is off our AI topic, but when, TikTok going off, a lot of consumers in the U.S. went to other Chinese-run systems. They didn't go to Meta. They didn't go to Instagram and Facebook and so on. They went to another Chinese service.
The Red something. I can't remember the name of the service.
Whatever it is, it's kind of the way to say, like Mao's Little Red Book. That's Chinese. And so you can't stop it. And when it comes to AI, by trying to cut off the Chinese, we only created more robust competition. Yeah. And so you can't just turn off globalism. Globalism's a reality. And in technology especially, and in the internet, a connected world, and in science, we are irretrievably global. And I think that's another message for the DeepSeek story. Now, whether DeepSeek, it'll be interesting, take a long bet. In 6 months, will DeepSeek still be the hot thing or not?
Yeah.
For what you said, it kind of doesn't matter. It made an impact.
Yeah, it proved something that wasn't easily identifiable prior, and what that means for DeepSeek's business specifically, that is an entirely different question. I'm sure they're going to be part of the conversation to some degree. Being the first ones to kind of prove this smaller, more robust, less expensive model going toe to toe, blah blah blah. There's a lot of story there, so I think that keeps DeepSeek in the conversation. But really, the bigger picture here is, there's a different way to do this than the way that we just all assumed it needed to be done, which required an insane amount of capital and time and investment. And, like you said, kind of the unsung hero part of this story is the fact that it's open source. Like, immediately people can do what they want with these models, and they aren't hamstrung by the $200 a month pro membership for ChatGPT to do some random thing, which is, I have to imagine those kinds of pricing structures begin to tame out a little bit or dissolve to a certain degree, because the value, is the value the same today as it was a week ago or 2 weeks ago? I don't know that it is.
Yeah, and if you look at the cost, so GPT-4 cost $40 million. What's that, dollars? Yeah, $40 million to train, and DeepSeek cost, I think, something like $6 million.
$6 million. Yeah.
Yeah, and for a university, and I'm involved in a very STEM-based university now at Stony Brook, and so this, I think, affects the ambition you can have at that lower level, whether you're a company or a university or a lab or a country. Right, there were countries that probably said, we can't play in this. France was there with Mistral, but as usual, many European countries will say, oh no, the Americans again, geez, we're left out. They won't pick us for the team. Well, no, China proved that anybody can be in this game.
Yeah.
So great time to have a podcast, huh?
Yeah, I know, totally. It's an exciting time.
Fascinating.
It's cool to kind of be in a position.
Just when you thought, it's going to be 3 or 4 big companies, they're going to own it all. So here we go again. Boom.
Yeah. I know. It all changes. Just when we thought we knew everything, then suddenly I have a dream about DeepSeek. It's real quick shout out to Dimitri Shapiro from Mind Studio, who is watching us on Facebook, live streaming right now. Is it Facebook? Yeah, it is Facebook. Hey, Dimitri.
I accidentally didn't put it on Twitter. I put it on Facebook and LinkedIn. So, hi, Dimitri.
Yeah, I know. We've got different networks. I like it. We're spreading it around. So another thing that I was alluding to just a little bit ago is this movement on OpenAI's front. The next two stories are actually OpenAI features. Or
yeah, we remember them. We're old enough to remember OpenAI.
Yeah, you remember OpenAI? They used to be a big deal before DeepSeek came along. OpenAI launched ChatGPT Gov, which is a new product designed specifically for U.S. government use. Now that Altman's getting real cozy with the current administration, as they all are right now.
And the Pentagon has said not to use DeepSeek, by the way, because it's Chinese.
I mean, had to see that coming. Yeah, of course. This product provides enhanced security beyond ChatGPT Enterprise. So it's a self-hosted solution. It can process for the government sensitive, non-public information within that secure environment, which absolutely you need if you're going to use something like this. It operates, within the government the walls. Operates through Microsoft Azure Commercial Cloud, Azure Government Community Cloud. It's compliant with many of the most important security frameworks: IL5, CJIS, ITAR, FedRAMP High. And it's testing starting next month. And yeah, so this could be integrated with defense agencies, law enforcement, healthcare organizations. This is OpenAI getting real cozy with the U.S. government
trying to
specifically for them, or trying to. Yeah, for sure. And then another product that they announced, and this is actually a total different direction than what we were just talking about, but this is all about agents, and it's a project called Operator, and it's a research preview right now. This is one of those features, one of those products that you can only get access to if you're on the $200 per month plan through OpenAI. So I think eventually it'll come to the $20 plan. But essentially what it is it's a computing using agent. That's the model that's driving Operator. That's what OpenAI called it. It simulates keyboard and mouse clicks in a browser. A browser instance. So it's not like it opens up your own browser and starts browsing. It's done through their system and streamed to your computer. And it's a remote browser essentially in the cloud. And it acts out those actions based on a command that you enter. So if you wanted to, book a 6:30, this is always the example, right? Book me a 6:30 reservation at, Boulevard Restaurant for 2 people tonight, and you can actually watch you can choose to watch. You don't have to, but you can choose as it opens up that kind of virtualized browser instance and navigates the site and does all the things. And if it hits a point that it knows, or it has been programmed or told to ask for your confirmation or intervention, then it won't go any further. So like logging into something or confirming a reservation or spending money, there are things at which it requires a confirmation from you. But this is ChatGPT's agent, essentially.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting about this, I can't play with it because I'm not spending $200 a month. Sorry, Altman. But I think what's interesting about this is that it does become the point where you can see what's going on. And the fact that Dimitri is here with his application, that's part of the advantage of what he's built. And the problem with AI and agentry is it's opaque. Well, it went off and did something. It came back and it gave me an answer. And DeepSeek tries to stimulate a process of giving you an answer. But again, I don't know how credible that is. In this case, you watch it actually do it. So I think that does have some value, at least as kind of an educational level in the early days of agentic AI, to show you, oh yeah, that's how it did it. Okay, all right, I trust it then. It's doing the right things.
It does have some partnerships. So like Instacart, DoorDash, Etsy, OpenTable, TripAdvisor, a number of other sites that are partners. I do wonder what that means. Does that mean that they've trained the system specifically on those sites to work well with them? which I feel like we've seen before, not in the AI realm. Does that mean that they get a rev share if someone uses Instacart through the browser instance to, buy some food
It's also an interesting problem. I talked on the show many weeks ago that we had SEO, search engine optimization, and then we have generative GEO, generative engine optimization. Then you need to go to IO, agentic engine optimization, where if the agent understands how to navigate your site and you redesign the site,
yeah,
right, yeah,
if your button suddenly changes from green to red, simple color change, is that enough to totally throw it off based on what it had learned? And little things like that probably
it'll be interesting
have
to watch.
A big impact. It'll be really interesting to watch. And I'm sure this is the kind of stuff that gets figured out eventually. But, and also, again, how do we feel about assigning a task, to an agent like this? Like there's probably a certain level of task that I'd feel comfortable with, because if it gets it wrong, it's not the end of the world. And there's a certain level of tasks that I probably would have a really hard time convincing myself to rely on it until it can prove to me that I can trust it, But, and actually another point before we go to a break, how does an agent like this that can do human-like things on the web, how does that impact the financial underpinnings of how the web operates? So much of how sites determine, who gets what money and attention and all this is based on our human attention. When we visit a site, they know we're a captive audience. They put up an ad, and that matters. That means something, that someone's paying for that. How is that influenced or changed or impacted by the fact that there's a bunch of robots doing that instead?
Right. One of the big, the golden fleece in the advertising industry is to prove that there was a relationship between seeing the ad and taking the action.
Yeah.
And who gets credit for that, right? But what potentially changes here, you're right, it's fascinating, Jason, I hadn't thought about this, is that if I have my OpenAI agent go off and buy those shoes, right? OpenAI is going to come along to the shoe place and say, "Ante up, or I'm not buying from you anymore," which then affects the credibility of OpenAI's agent with me, because you got me crappy shoes. I like those shoes better. You didn't buy them. Well, because you're not getting the deal. So what's the transparency about those deals and how it operates? And does a media property get the money, or does the agent, as the middleman, so to speak, get the money, or no one gets the money and it stays in the pockets of, this is kind of a Craig Newmark way to look at things, the customer and the company at the end, rather than all these middlemen? It does throw up a lot of questions about these financial relationships.
Indeed, it does. Curious to see how that all pans out. Going to take a quick break, one more quick break, and then we got a few more stories to round things out coming up here in a second. All right, you flagged this series of stories, and I'm happy that you did. Reid Hoffman, as well as renowned cancer researcher Siddhartha Mukherjee. I'm probably mispronouncing the name, but launched Manas AI drug discovery startup. And this is concentrating initially on breast cancer, on prostate cancer, on lymphoma, and it's using Microsoft's data centers for their operations. Of course, Hoffman is a Microsoft board member. And they plan to generate their revenue through the development and sale of the company's own drugs to tackle some of these issues. And you put this in here. You wanted to be sure that we talk about it, so I'm really curious to hear kind of what your thoughts are.
So there's a couple pieces of Reid Hoffman news right now, and what I'm interested in, Reid is unquestionably a technological optimist. He believes in the power of technology. He believes that it can do great things for us. He's not as obnoxious as Andreessen. I wouldn't call him an accelerationist, but he does believe we can do great things with the technology. Let's control it. So one of the things he did was, this is a company Mukherjee wrote a very famous book about cancer, and to tie with him to reimagine ways to attack cancers, and they're going to do that, is great. At the same time, Reid has a new book out called Super Agency. And he has a New York Times op-ed, and he just appeared on Morning Joe. And Morning Joe drives me nuts because it's as I often tweet, oh, what time is it? It's moral panic o'clock on Morning Joe. Because they're going to go after everything wrong with technology, and it's phones, and it's social media, and now it's AI. And here was Reid Hoffman.
Help yourself but watch, Joe.
Yeah, or as I tell people on socials, I watch so you don't have to.
Right.
So here comes Reid saying, no, we can do good things. Yes, there are problems. We'll figure out those problems, and we can do good things. And it was wonderful to be, and it threw Mika Brzezinski for a loop. She didn't know what to do with this. You mean we have agency? And he said, yes, we do. So that's what I wanted to concentrate on today, a little bit, just for a minute. Because whatever you think of Reid's optimism, and whether you think it's too optimistic or not, put that aside. The moral, for a moment, the moral of the story, I think, is that we have more agency with technology than we know. And that sounds ridiculous, and I wrote about this in the Web We Weave. It sounds ridiculous because, well, the big companies control it. We can't do anything. It's the algorithm. It's the wizards of technology. But we do have the opportunity to make the technology work for us. And so I'm writing the next book right now on the history of the linotype. I won't bore you with the details right now. I will later. But it's the machine that stopped type being set one letter at a time through 500 years since Gutenberg, and then set it a line at a time, and it opened the door to the mechanization, or ended the process of the mechanization and industrialization of print, opened the door to mass media. Okay. The story that's related here, I'm sorry, I've got... I didn't turn off the ringer. I have an old phone. I have an old-fashioned phone. We never answer it because it's only going to be spam, and it's over there, so give me about 4 rings and it'll go away. I apologize.
We got rid of that phone a long time ago.
Yeah, no, I'm old. I got a phone like that. We're not going to get rid of it. But we never answer it, as it can prove right now. There's other people in the house, and we just don't answer it. Anyway.
Why would you?
Yeah. So the story that interests me about the linotype is that the typesetters, the people who set type one letter at a time for 450 years, along comes this machine, and they are threatened to death by it. They're also threatened that new people could operate that machine, women and young people and others. And they could have done what the Luddites did. They could have tried to destroy the machine, or others who did in movements. But instead, the International Typographical Union said, no, it's inevitable, and we're going to control the machine. We are the best ones to set type on it. We're going to control it. We're going to do it. And they knew that the jobs that they had would go down for a bit, but they also knew that publishing would explode because the cost of publishing was down. We could have more newspapers, thicker newspapers, in more places, more magazines, more books. There would be more printers as a result. And so by taking agency of the technology, they won for a long time until the next time when they fought it, and I won't go into that today. So the only reason I wanted to mention Reid Hoffman's book, which I haven't read yet, I've bought, his op-ed in the Times, his appearance on Morning Joe, and he proves it by investing in companies like a cancer company, is that his message is take agency over the technology. Make it do good things for us. Make it ours. And I think that's a moral to the story about how we deal with technology. And what interests me about AI is that even though you and I, Jason, can't make a model right now, probably never can, we probably can't train a model, but more and more and more, isn't the lesson of AI that people without technology backgrounds can run the technology, can be the boss of it, can tell it what to do? Isn't that what Lev Manovich proves? And that he uses it. I love the discussion there about how he saw the combative nature of it as a fight and a struggle, but he was going to win. He was inevitably going to win because he's the artist. And so that's just an interesting context here, I think, to all of our discussions about AI. And so I wanted to take this little rabbit hole tour today. And that's why normally Jason does a great job. We put in tons of links in the rundown. And Jason really does. He has a great news judgment, and he picks out the stories. And I never disagree with him. This one case, before he decided, I figured Jason's going to look at that and say, why did Jeff put that in there? That's a little weird.
I love that you called it out.
Yeah, so I called it out, and I said, I want to rant about this for a minute because it's not obvious what the rant is. But the rant for this show, for what we do, I think, is that's so exciting about this area is that we want to empower all of us to be able to use the technology in a way that's beneficial to us. Also being aware of the bad parts, also being aware of the risks, absolutely. But if we don't try to take it over, we're fools. That was it. Thank you.
Kind of an overarching theme of today's episode
It really
particular, specifically with Lev, with the DeepSeek news, with Reid Hoffman, is this idea that like, oh wow, this is a technology that is, you know, incredibly democratizing.
It comes to a human level. Yeah,
it becomes accessible for all, and there are opportunities for everyone to get involved in it. And
there's things that we hope that I can't use it to cure cancer. But I'm glad the people who perhaps can are working on it.
Absolutely.
And also for our next story, I'll never be able to do what the next story does either.
Yeah, this is one of those stories that, like, you know, I put in here fully realizing that I don't entirely understand it at a certain level, but I love that it's happening, and I understand it enough to know that it's, you know, things like this are significant. This is an AI model that's created a novel fluorescent protein, which apparently is a major leap in protein engineering. It's called ESM-GFP. It was developed using ESM-3, which is an AI system that simulated molecular evolution. That would, and this is, I think, the kind of key takeaway, it would have required 96 genetic mutations to happen naturally. But here it was trained on 2.78 billion natural proteins. It learned to complete partial protein blueprints based on its understanding of protein biology. And, you know, at this point, it's received peer review validation, publication in the journal Science. And it's just really, at the end of the day, a really big example, a demonstration of how AI can accelerate these things and our understandings or our development of certain things like protein engineering far beyond the constraints of natural evolution. You know what I mean? If you know how many, you know, years or decades or millennia or whatever would it take to do this? And yet here we have these systems that, you know, we have the ability to train them to do so much in so little time. And it's just kind of cool to think about what kind of doors that opens as we go forward with it.
The things we can't imagine. And I think that's good. And yes, there could be perils, and there could be things that we have to be cautious about. That's all true. But how can we not try to see where this might go?
Yeah. Very, very cool stuff. So cool. I think the overarching kind of thing from this show is a level of optimism.
A level of humanity. Right? A level of bringing it back to us.
Right.
It's not just gigantic companies that are control this and do stupid things. The tools might be in our hands.
Yeah, not just those things. Those things do exist, but it's also the other things too.
Yeah.
Huge thank you once again to Lev Manovich for spending his time with us for a little bit. That was a wonderful conversation. I'm really happy that we were able to finally get him on. Also, thank you to Dimitri for sharing.
I also should mention, by the way, that Lev is in New York right now because he has a part in an exhibit called Symbiosis: Art in the Age of AI at the Sylvia Wald and Po Kim Gallery in New York on Lafayette Street. And it's going on until March 29. So if you're in New York and you're inspired, by all means, buy Lev's book. You don't have to buy it. You can just read it online because he was generous enough to put it up there as a PDF. But also you might want to see his the show that this exhibition he's part of.
Love it. I wish I could see that. All right. Well, thank you for that. Thank you, Jeff, for everything that you do. JeffJarvis.com is where you can go to find all the books that Jeff has
written.
Gutenberg
parenthesis, now in paperback.
Now in paperback. There it is. And then, of course, magazine and the most recent book, The Web We Weave. Lots of themes as you read, you know, especially The Web We Weave, as I've read through it. A lot of themes from the show you know, distributed throughout the book and everything. So some really familiar kind of conversation or chapters in there. So it's worth reading as well there. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time. Appreciate doing this each and every week. Everything you need to know about the show can be found at our site. It is aiinside.show. You can also find a link to our new YouTube channel, youtube.com/@AI Inside Show, one word. That's where we were live streaming today. That's where all of our video episodes, past, present, and future, will be going forward. I'm so happy we have a dedicated channel for that. If you do love this show, we would really appreciate a refresh review in Apple Podcasts. That would, we actually put them up on the website as new ones come through. We haven't had some in a while, and we've been going for a while now. So if you want to go in there and refresh a review or leave a review, it really helps get attention onto the show, and we are definitely looking at growing it. So leave that review wherever you can. Probably Apple Podcasts is the best place to do that. And finally, patreon.com/AI Inside Show is the place that you can go to support us on a deeper level. You get ad-free shows, you get a Discord community. Sometimes we do some hangouts. We have an executive producer level, which is the top level to contribute at. But if you do that, you get your name called out at the end of the show. You get an AI Inside t-shirt. You also get a sticker. And just knowing that you're helping this show each and every week continue to thrive. Dr. Do, Jeffrey Maricini, WPVM 103.7 in Asheville, North Carolina, and Dante St. James. See, at this point, we've been reading some of these names for months now. This is a testament to how cool this level is, because now you know them by name. You're like, oh yeah, there's Dr. Do. Oh yeah, there's Jeffrey Maricini.
Exactly.
So that's kind of the benefit.
Our dear friends.
Yes, indeed. So thank you, everybody, so much for watching and for listening. We always enjoy doing this show and hanging out with you. We will see you next time on another episode of AI Inside. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.